So good evening, everybody. Welcome to this tutorial. And in this tutorial, we're going to learn about JavaScript basics. So I will introduce you to JavaScript functions as we will progress to more concept concerning JavaScript. So let's get started. Now I am using my code editor by the name Visual Studio or VS Code. And once I have opened my Visual Studio editor, I will open a folder which I have called JS Basics. You can call it whatever you want in whatever directly in your computer or in whatever directory in your computer. And then inside this folder, I'll create a file. So this is where I will create my first function from. So let's say this function is going to be about greetings, okay? So I'll create a new file there and I'll say greetings.js. So all files that are about JavaScript will end with that extension of .js. Press enter. Now I have my file open here, which is going to help me to create my first JavaScript function. Now, what is a function? A function is a block of reusable code that groups together a sequence of statements to perform a specific function. So in coding, there are high chances that we will be creating blocks of code that perform a specific function. So if you have a code that performs one specific function, you create that code to be a function. So we're going to see why we need to create functions other than just creating codes which are not in functions. So one of the ways to create a function, there are many ways of creating functions, and we're going to see those ways in later lessons. But one of the common ways of creating functions is by using function declarations. So function declaration is when you start your function by that key name function. So if we're going to create a function that is known as greet me, okay, so that function is going to start with the name function and then the function name, okay. So function names always must end with parentheses, okay. Now, to dive direct to how a function is written, let's practice it here. So we said one of the common ways of creating functions is by using function declarations, and the function declaration is started by the key name function. So let's write the name function space, and then you're going to write our function name. So in this case, let me call my function greet me, because this function is going to create a greeting, okay, or greet world, okay. So let's call it greet, then world. I want you to notice how I have written this name. Let's put our parentheses there first, okay. Then after parentheses, you put your space there and you create these curly braces or curly braces. Now, this function is having some convention here. Convention is a rule. So whenever you're creating a function in JavaScript that has more than one name, we use a convention that is known as camel case, okay. So camel case is when the first word starts with a small letter, the first letter of the first word starts with a small letter, and then the other words that follow it start with a capital letter. So this is what we call camel case. That's why you've seen me write great world in this way, other than writing it in this way, okay. Yes, it will still work, but for readability, JavaScript has made a convention for us to create that function with that camel case, which is the first word to have a small letters and the following words to have the first letter to be capital. Now, this is our function. So we've declared it with this function declaration of the keyword function. And then we have the function name, which is greet world. And then we have this parenthesis here, which shows that this is a function, okay? And then we have our curly braces. So inside our curly braces, this is where we're going to write our function, okay? Now, inside this function, we're going to use a certain JavaScript function that helps us to output whatever that we have in our function, okay? Or return whatever we have to the console. So console is one of the common places or platforms where we view whatever we have inside our codes. So let's write console dot, going to use a method of log. So to log whatever is in our function to the console, and then parentheses, and then quotes there. So we're going to put our greetings of hello world. So because the function is all about greeting the world, we're going to write hello world. Okay, let's end with a semicolon there. So now this is a function. This is a complete function that performs a specific task. And in this case, the specific task is about greeting, okay, or greeting the world. So we have a function declaration there, function name, accompanied by parentheses, and then inside our curly braces, that's why we have put our console log, which says hello world. Perfect. This is a complete function. However, this is function declaration. So for any function to work, it must be called, okay? Or we say function call. So what's a function call? So function call is when whatever code that is inside the function body only runs or it executes when a function is called. So when you call a function, is when we take that function name, okay, together with its parentheses and write it somewhere outside the curly brace or outside the function body. So this is our function body. So if I want to call this function, I'll press enter and then write this function name below here in line 4, that is greet world, and then write the parentheses there, okay? So to call a function in our code, we type the function name then followed by the parentheses. So the function call now is the one that's going to execute the function body. So for us to execute this function body here, it is the function call down here that is going to help us to execute that function call, okay? So the function call executes the function body, and that is all the statements within the curly braces in the body. Now, once we have called our function, I hope that you have your code runner installed in VS Code, because that's how we're going to easily run the code. So if you have not installed code runner, you come to these extensions, then you write code runner, write code runner. Already have mine installed here. It's founded by Junhan, okay? It has over 27.7 million by the time of this recording. So it is the one that's going to help us to run this code easily. So once it's installed, there is a button on the top right here that is going to ask us to run code. So once I click it like that, so I'm right away going to see my results here down that are saying hello world, okay? So if were it not for the function call, then we will not have this output down here. So these are going to see all the outputs of whatever we are doing in JavaScript that needs us to see the results in the console. Now that one has been done by the console.log here, okay? So that's the one that has helped us to find the results of this function or of this program known as greetings.js. So if you notice here, the place where the code is running from is in users dev mic desktop development JS basics, and then the file name greetings.js, and then it's giving us the outcome there. Now, why should we use functions. Now, assuming I wanted to write a function that greets the world 1,000 times, okay, what will I do? I will have now gone back to writing another function like this below here, paste it, okay, call it, okay, so I call it great world, okay, I do the same thing below here, I call this other function, so that I have two hello worlds, okay, I have two hello worlds. But in programming, wherever you see yourself repeating something, then definitely that's not the best way to do it. So there should be another way to do it. Now that's why functions come in handy. So the goodness of a function is always a reusable code, meaning once I create it once, I can reuse it anytime I wish and in the number of times that I wish. So assuming I've written my function here that is greet world, and I want to output this greeting 10 times, I do not need to write this function 10 times. Only thing that I'm supposed to do is to call this function 10 times, okay? So I have called this function once. Now let me copy it and paste it 10 times to, okay, as twice. Let me copy it and paste it 10 times. 3 is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've written my function once, but I've called it 10 times. Now, what do you think will be the output? 10 hello worlds. So when I click that code runner, you see that my function has given me 10 results. I wrote it once, but I call it 10 times. So that's the power of functions, my friends. You can write it once, but execute it as many times as you can. Okay, so that's how we write functions, and that's how we call functions. So there's another unique key feature in JavaScript that is called function hoisting. So what is function hoisting? So function hoisting is a feature in JavaScript that allows access to a function declaration before it is defined. Now, allow me to clear all these calls here, okay? So our function is declared but has not been called, okay? Now, if I try to put this function call before I define my function, okay? Let me say I declare this function that is great world above here, because we know when a function or code is executed, it runs from top down, okay? So if I declare my function there, great world, and then later define it, do you think this function or this code is going to run or not? Let's see. So if I run the code, you notice that the code has run, okay? Now, this is a very unique feature in JavaScript that we call function hoisting that helps us to access a function before it is defined. And we access it by declaring it before it is defined. So that's a rule, or that's a feature in JavaScript that helps us to access functions before they are defined. So later in your journey in programming, you're likely going to find such code bases which have defined a function or have declared a function which you have not yet seen it defined anywhere. So it's possible you find your function declared, and then lines later, that's when now the line, that's when the code has been defined. The function is declared, not yet defined, but still working. So what JavaScript does, it takes this function, keeps it somewhere in the memory, and then once it finds the function definition, it now utilizes